Good morning.
Good morning.
I have to say that writing this sermon on creativity was hard. And I think it's because creativity refused to be boxed in. But happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I hope you'll be indulged and spoiled today. As I thought about this topic of unleashing creativity, landing on Father's Day as it has, my first thought was, well, my dad wasn't really creative, was he? Sorry, Dad. I was thinking about the outward displays of creativity, like my mom's, Mary's, rhyming poems that celebrated life events. Mary, whom we called Hums-a-Lot, because she hummed or sang her way through life. Mary, who was the editor of her college newspaper and our church's newsletter, and a masterful storyteller. But Dad? He ran a business, building custom homes. In fact, our whole neighborhood, Willow Grove, was the product of his home building enterprise. I suppose there was creativity in that, especially the spec houses, those he built without a client in mind and then put up for sale. He was certainly a great baseball athlete and spent years teaching angsty teenagers the finer points of America's game. Is that creativity? Then I remembered his trains. Gordon devoted the entire basement of our Willow Grove home to creating a world of his imagination in HO scale. And you might see the engine, one of the engines from my dad's trains down there. Winter evenings, he'd be downstairs adding another so-called town or another line or more little people or trees or buildings and landscapes to his creation, the Willow Grove and Western Railroad. With wooden supports that elevated the railscape to eye level and a hand-wired control board, my father could simultaneously run 2 trains from one room in the basement to the other, rounding an orange Formica-topped bar before returning back to his train room. Proud of his 8 progeny and the entire neighborhood he built, or maybe feeling a little guilty for the number of hours he spent down there, Dad used one of those dyno makers, remember those? To create a label. And he labeled and named parts of his train world after his 8 progeny, us kids, and the neighbors. Among the many labels he affixed to the wooden supports were Mimi's Riding Stable, Hankton Junction, Julia Station, Camp Robert Vincent, and Lake Elaine. I wanted to be named after a lake. I was boring old Jennifer Yards. Not even a town. If I had asked my father, though, whether he thought he was creative, he'd have shaken his head no. Show of hands, who here has told themselves at one time or another that they are not particularly creative? I'm one. As a young engineer, I thought I had 0 creativity. And I'm laughing a little because, is Debbie here? Debbie Lamb? Oh, there. Yeah. I'm laughing a little because last Sunday, Debbie Lamb and I were talking about creativity. Sorry, Debbie. And she declared she had none. I pointed out to her that her spreadsheets were quite impressive and awesome creations. Perhaps we avoid calling ourselves creative because when we think of creativity, we think of Mozart, Picasso, Einstein, people with a seemingly fated convergence of talent and opportunity. What if each of us is born carrying a bundle of gifts that are ours uniquely? And what if, over time, we're meant to develop and be seen in those gifts, offering them in times of joy or need? Life is designed to be imaginative, sensuous, and full of wonder. Instead, we arrive into a strange, industrialized world where over and over again, we experience diminishment, control, programming, something that takes us away from the unique and magical expression of who we truly are. Reverend Daniel McCoy writes, "Creativity brings this and that together to see what will happen. For example, words come together to make lines, and lines become stanzas, soon lyrics, and when a melody is added, voila, a song. Then a song comes together alongside singers and instruments, and some listeners, and soon we have a concert. Creativity brings this and that together to see what will happen. Paints in a canvas, plants in soil, wood in a blueprint. Is it as simple as this?" In her book, 12 Secrets of Highly Creative Women by Gail McMeekin, I believe among the most important so-called secrets is to acknowledge your creative self. Career coach Barbara Scher writes, your creativity is waiting for you like a dancing partner. So ridding your psyche of I'm nots is a vital step toward embracing your bundle of gifts. Try saying this every day: I enjoy my creativity in whatever form and shape it takes. Quantum science has proven that humans are electromagnetic beings. The cells in our body are like miniature batteries or electrical generators. Our nervous system uses this electrical energy to create nerve impulses that help to transmit messages from one part of the body to another. We are pure energy. Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear, says, ideas are energy as well. She writes, ideas are a disembodied, energetic life form. The only way an idea can be made manifest in our world is through collaboration with a human partner. Creativity brings this and that together to see what will happen. Gilbert tells the story of her novel in progress with a very specific plot about a middle-aged spinster who is secretly in love with her boss, who has gotten himself into some kind of trouble and gone missing in the Amazon Delta. But Elizabeth abandons the project because she's so busy with other opportunities. Years later, Anne Patchett, whom she scarcely knew, published a novel, State of Wonder, and the plot is almost identical to the one Elizabeth Gilbert abandoned. Elizabeth credits the life force behind the idea as having given up on her slacker and distracted writing and found a more willing recipient in Anne Patchett. Who knew? As Pastor Paula said in her sermon last week, Jesus, the man from Nazareth, seemed to have an intuitive sense for when a story was called for, and he seized the opportunities to tell them. I imagine Jesus as a kid around a fire with his elders, listening to a story about the ancestors or the land, perhaps told by Mary or Joseph or by his grandmother, the mysterious unnamed woman in the Bible. Someone nurtured the innate storytelling capacity that Jesus possessed. If they hadn't, it's likely Jesus might not have had the confidence to tell a story when a story was called for. In last week's gospel, we heard the story of the mustard seed, symbolizing the insignificant and unremarkable, yet when planted and tended, grows into a magnificent plant. If Jesus hadn't been nourished in his own storytelling capacities, would he have talked himself out of sharing the story about the mustard seed? Would the idea of the story have gone to someone else? An idea needs a host, a human, to make it real. If one abandons a story, an idea, or a creation, another will feel the impulse to pick it up and give it life. So what fosters the seeding and feeding of our ideas? Here are 4 brief things. The first is getting out of the habit and seeing differently. Anything we do can be addressed in a creative manner, from habits to hobbies to work. My yoga instructor, Patrick, has a thing he does. Anytime we are asked to step one leg out, for example, for Warrior 2, he asks us to use the unaccustomed leg. The unaccustomed leg is the non-default, the one you don't normally step out with. Time and time again, it's like when we fold our arms. Let's try doing this now. Fold our arms. Now try to fold them in the other direction. Feels weird. It confirms how we often sleepwalk our way through life by doing those things out of habit. So getting out of the habit expands our way of seeing differently. Harry Chapin wrote a song, some of you might remember, called Flowers Are Red. And John is going to play it for you now. The ones who have the colorful crayons in our hands. I wrote a poem about seeing differently. I called it The Outs List, because in my family's Willow Grove days, sometimes several of the 8 of us were out on dates or activities long after my parents went to bed. Before she went up, my mom wrote an outs list, the names of those still out. For some reason, we didn't have a key, so it was last one in, lock up. Mom's outs list was something more than it seemed, I realized. What if your body is mostly water held in an odd-shaped vessel? What if your hands are actors, your voice a river, your heart not just a pump, but a beacon to the cosmos? What if your life is a canvas, your ears antennae, your nose deep reservoirs for fragrance? What if dimples are diplomats and freckles just another variety of sunflower? What if everything is different than it seems? Take the outs list my mom created each night to keep track of how many of her 8 were not at home when she went to bed. No keys for the door, so last one in locks up. The list of names, sometimes Gordy, Mimi, and Roseanne, perhaps Henry, Elaine, Jenny, Julia, or Robert. More than names. A prayer imbued in her cursive letters, or perhaps a conjuring spell, like those from her Irish homelands. Let them make good choices. Let them return in one piece. Let them hear the siren call to home, to live another day in the odd-shaped vessel, mostly water. The second thing I've learned about creativity is to lean into fear and the unknown. Again, Elizabeth Gilbert writes, "The capacity to linger in the unknown is a gateway to creativity, which asks you to enter into realms of uncertain outcome, and fear hates uncertain outcomes. Evolution has trained us to be hypervigilant and insanely overprotective when we feel fear. By learning to embrace the blank page, silence, the unknowing, the cauldron of possibilities thickens." The third thing I've learned about creativity is that scale is an illusion. Sometimes in the wee hours I ask myself, shouldn't I be doing something useful for the planet rather than writing stories and songs? Or you might think, I'll never win an award for my art, decor, sailing, golf, garden. Why even waste the time? We've been conditioned to believe that making a huge impact is what matters. Unless you're Caitlin Clark, you shouldn't play basketball. Unless you're Scotty Scheffler, you shouldn't play golf. Unless you're Beyonce, you shouldn't sing. And unless you're Martha Stewart, you shouldn't cook. This misguided and even insane thinking is what robs us of our wonder, prevents us from developing our own bundle of gifts for the village. And yet, anyone who has read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, anyone's read that, was likely reminded that scale is illusory. Heartfelt offerings to family, friends, and community are enough. I have to say that about 12 times every day. The choreographer, Martha Graham, writes, "Because there is only one of you in all of time, your expression is unique. And if you block it, the world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, how valuable, how it compares to others. It is your business to keep the channel open." The fourth and last point about creativity has to do with setting boundaries and staying true to your uniqueness. The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "Care about people's approval and you become their prisoner." So I'd suggest we beware anyone who starts a sentence with, "You should." The poet Billy Collins, in his inimitable way, writes about how society inserts themselves into his creative process. From his Aimless Love collection, we have the suggestion box. It all began fairly early in the day at the coffee shop, as it turned out, when the usual waitress said, "I'll bet you're gonna write a poem about this," after she knocked a cup of coffee into my lap. Then later in the morning, I was told by a student that I should write a poem about the fire drill that was going on, as we all stood outside on the lawn outside the building. In the afternoon, a woman I barely knew said, "You could write a poem about this," pointing to a dirigible that was passing overhead. And if that weren't enough, a friend turned to me as we walked past a man whose face was filled with tattoos and said, "I see a poem coming." Why is everyone being so helpful? I wondered that evening by the shore of a lake. Maybe I should write a poem about all the people who think they know what I should be writing poems about. It was just then, in the fading light, that I spotted a pair of ducks emerging from a cluster of reeds to paddle out to open water, the female glancing back over her russet shoulder, just in time to see me searching my pockets for a pen. "I knew it," she quacked, with a bit of a brogue. "But who can blame you for following your heart?" And she went on, "Now go write a lovely poem about me and the mister." Beware those who think they know what it is you should play, write, sing, garden, dance, craft, or organize. Sometimes it takes a bit of reflection to identify what inside of us could be called creative. And as I look out over everyone gathered here today, I'd like to acknowledge all of us for our creativity. Michelle's post-sermon interludes, Patricia's compositions, Carol's knitting, Maureen's incredible cultural je ne sais quoi, Irv's stone carons, Nancy's love of all God's creatures, Stephen's woodcraft. It goes on and on. John's ability to manifest the free stuff by the side of the road. Whether it's flower arranging, coaching clients, photography, writing, storytelling, and yes, spreadsheets, we are creators. So, finishing these musings on creativity, the message that matters most is that every moment, every day is an adventure in unleashing our bundle of gifts. Elizabeth Gilbert has her own take on Martha Graham's quote. She writes, "Creativity is sacred, and it is not sacred. What we make matters enormously, and it doesn't matter at all. We toil alone, and we are accompanied by spirits. The work wants to be made, and it wants to be made through you." So on this Father's Day, I realized that all of what my dad had to offer was creative. Whether home building or coaching baseball, or leading Rotary or the Knights of Columbus, or his Willow Grove and Western Railroad, Dad was using the bundle of gifts that he was born with. For the sheer fancy of it, I once crafted a magic wand. And boy howdy, didn't it feel nostalgic and right. To add to it, Jennifer Yards, my little dime label. May all your gifts live fully in the world. Amen.